Although we can use a 2D program like Animate to create 3D objects, there are other ways that we can approach 3D objects. The way I'm going to show you today is by using a program called Maya. Now, there's many 3D programs out there. Maya is just one, and a very popular industry standard one. There's another very popular one called Blender, which is open source and free always. Maya is free for you guys because of the free educational license, and it's free for instructors as well. And we'll use that where the objects will actually be three-dimensional in volume, even though we're looking at it on a 2D screen. Again, this cube is just a flat representation. It's just lines, just like a drawing on a piece of paper, which means that I have to draw every single frame to create the illusion of a spinning cube. In a program like Maya, we will not need to do that. In Maya, we have a three-dimensional space here, and we will learn how to navigate this 3D space by holding our Alt-Option key on our keyboard and dragging around. So you can see the grid, which won't be rendered, is used as a guide to tell us kind of where we are in space. So unlike the 2D Animate cube, I can go here to Create, Polygon Cube, and you'll see here that I have a three-dimensional cube. Now we can create a lot of simple objects using these things called primitives. We can go to here, Create, Polygon Primitives, and add spheres, cubes. You can even add things like helix. And we'll learn how to manipulate these helix so that we can get objects that look something like that, 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 and we can get a spring if we need it. So like 2D work, there are stock sites that sell these models, except in this case, you're not buying an image, but you're actually buying a three-dimensional model that you can use and modify as you need. And because the actual whole model is created, you can rotate it to any angle you need. You can see here the basic shapes that create this object. Now I can search for a more complicated car, and you can see that they sell collections. They sell cars like this, and you can say yes, it's pretty photorealistic. And indeed, a lot of times when you watch car commercials, sometimes you're not actually seeing the actual car. Sometimes you're just seeing a three-dimensional version of it, depending on the commercial that they're trying to set. To keep you a little entertained, a story that you can tell your friends and family. Through TurboSquid made a video, a very funny video about issues they've had of people inadvertently finding their website when searching to buy tank, for example. Maybe there are sites that want to sell an actual tank for relatively cheap, but maybe not $300. But some people will think that they're purchasing a real tank, and they'll send TurboSquid complaints that they haven't received their tank yet, and then TurboSquid has to explain that it's actually not a real tank that they're going to send, but just a 3D model in their email. They've had similar issues when some people find that TurboSquid sells women, and they've gotten death threats and complaints and threats to call the police that selling women is illegal and they should be ashamed of themselves. And again, TurboSquid just has to explain that they're not selling real women; they're just selling a three-dimensional model of a woman. So models at this level is if you continue in fields that require 3D modeling and animation, like animation, game design, sculpture, and such. For us, since we are focusing our section on image sequence and digital painting, we will do more simplistic models just to get comfortable with the tools, so that when you see the tool again in the future, you will not be so intimidated. Indeed, a lot of animations you have seen that you thought were entirely 2D actually had 3D elements that were meant to blend into the style, either through, in this case, with simplistic renderings, shaders, or sometimes something called a toon shader that actually renders out the 3D to make it look like it was drawn using a vector tool like Illustrator or Animate. Early applications of 3D computer graphics were to create objects in engineering, manufacturing. Uh, Here in this image, you can see the primitive nature of a lot of the objects we use in our real life situations. Naturally, it is easier to use existing stock material like pipes and plates to create objects in our real world. As computer graphics evolved, people were able to start creating more organic objects. We have Ed Catmull to thank for introducing 3D computer graphics into the entertainment industry when he started experimenting with 3D computer graphics for animation and computer graphics. This hand is the first 3D model ever seen in a film. There was computer graphics used in other films, but this is the first scenario of using a three-dimensional hand. This is a rendered version of that same hand used in the film. The film was a sequel to Westworld called Future World, which was the original Westworld and not the current Westworld HBO version. You might know Ed Catmull better from the company he founded, Pixar. Interestingly enough, John Lasseter, who was working at Disney at the time, was trying to promote computer graphics and playing with 3D animation, and was actually fired when Disney did not think that this direction would have a future. Fortunately for the vision of some, they were able to create Toy Story in Pixar and make history in 3D computer animation. Now, 3D should be seen as just another tool to help you create your art. In this case, of course, the 3D can be used for art, including animation, sculpture. 3D printing has become commonplace. But just like 2D animation is just one way to create animation, we have stop motion, we have claymation, we have all these different techniques. 3D becomes another one with its advantages and disadvantages. Of course, the advantage of 3D animation does include that, like real life objects, you do not have to redraw them, but rather, more like puppetry or claymation, you just have to move and manipulate it to create your animation. Now, because unlike stop motion, this is in a computer, you can do simple animations using tweening in between frames that the computer automatic does for you very easily by keyframing a spot, say here, going down the timeline, moving your object, making another keyframe, and then the animation is animated automatically. And this will include, just like in 2D animation, your rotations and even your scaling. With the added feature, of course, just like in Animate, that you have a camera that moves in 3D space rather than 2D space. So with that, we are going to learn the basics of creating a three-dimensional room and maybe decorating that room with some frames and some furniture. And perhaps you can use this in your art.